All right, so you just saw just a time lapse of the swingers getting put together and tacked on the frame and all that type of stuff. Everything that was involved with it, the drag links, all that stuff. So now I guess I can explain some of it. And if you see on this side, this beam pivot and this swinger, the relationship to them, they're kind of much closer than if we look on this side. These ones got a further spread. So how did that, I guess the question I got for this video and putting swingers up was the relationship to beam pivots and how you figure out where the swingers need to go in according to the beam pivot. So this is how I did it. So I have my wheel center line still marked on here that these aren't exactly in position, but oops, because of that, they spin. And then my spread that I had said in the first video was 7 inches on these beam pivots. So going with, staying with the lucky 7, we went 7 inches on this side from the wheel center line to the center of this heim here for this swinger. And that got me the clearance I want. This beam is gonna end up cycling up through here in between this beam pivot and this swinger. And then this tie rod is gonna end up cycling right up in here. So you've got pretty much these two and these two intersecting on this side. You need to have clearance for them. Transferring over to this side then, that 7 inches doesn't directly apply because on that side, the beam pivot is behind the center line. You don't have to worry about it. On this side, this beam pivot is in front of it and you've got this angle kicked. So to keep the same angle as the beams, I've gone 7 inches, which that was wrong. 7 inches from center line is somewhere in this range, but you need to add the 3.5 inches with the beam pivot as well. So the 7 plus the 3.5 gets me up in here to 10.5. And these are just measurements that are working for me. These aren't necessarily measurements that are set in stone. This is what you need to do. Like I said, this is just what I'm doing, and this is what this truck is calling for this frame. So this one, center line is at 10.5 inches, which you'll get same, this beam and this swinger, this has to have enough clearance in here for this tie rod to come through here. This bolt has to get flipped around, that's in backwards. These need to be 9/16 bolts yet, those are only half, but then they'll get cut off. There'll be plenty of clearance for this tie rod to come in here. You do gotta account though, as the steering turns, this tie rod will move in and out. It's not just gonna stay perfectly in the center here. As this thing rotates right or left, this will actually be moving. So I'm not necessarily married to the idea of all this stuff yet, because at the end of the day, the goal that I'm trying to get is the bare minimum I need to get to a point of cycling all this stuff. So I need a radius arm in here yet. I need a gearbox drag link over to this swinger. I need all that in here to then be able to start setting this up a little bit more and seeing where my clearances are. You know, maybe my measurements aren't gonna work. I might have to knock these off and change what I'm doing. That's kind of one of the things that I would say I'm doing much differently than that truck. I'm trying to go with the bare minimum. You know, this is all gonna eventually get a lot more plate work in here. There will be overlays on all these bolt holes. Everything right now is 3/16 plate for all this stuff. But I'll probably be adding a lot of 1/8 inch weld washers and overlays, plus dimpled gussets, all that stuff is gonna come. But kind of on the blue truck, I would maybe have built this thing in its entirety. I would have finished it and then set it in here, cycled it. Well, if I find out that the geometry on these or the spread needs to change or something like that, it was very difficult to throw something in the trash that you had a week or two into building, because it was a finished part, but it's the wrong finished part. So that's something I'm trying to avoid this time. So none of this is necessarily I'm married to. Like these knuckles, I'm still not 100% sure I'm gonna use these. The more I think about it, the more I get this along. I've gotta change, you know, that's why these are long. I've gotta change this. I've gotta cut that off and change it. It doesn't have a brake caliper mount on it, and the KPI issue that they have to keep the correct camber. With all these things going on, you know, originally I guess I had the idea of I'll keep these and salvage them because I have them, it'll save time, but this is kind of one of those things. If I'm really applying what I learned from that truck to this truck, I should probably just scrap these, take my loss on what I've paid for these things, and the fact that they're just no good. They're an expensive paperweight. So that will probably be coming, and that's gonna end up, you know, I'm gonna have to knock this free. I'm gonna get this KPI set where it needs to. Those are those things that it's still the reality of. This stuff is trial and error, at least for me. It's only the second one I've ever built, so. And like I said, this is how I'm figuring it. This is how I'm doing it. And it's pretty much just applying what I did, lessons I learned on that first one, and trying to apply it to this one to make it a little easier and a little cheaper on the budget and not to waste as much. So anyways, now that I'm rambling, I'll get that over with. If you got any other questions on some of that stuff, kind of next, what I'm gonna be doing is, setting up this gearbox. I need to get one ordered. Get that drag link in here. You can see that's where the input from the steering will come, is into this swinger right here, into this heim. This tie rod then controls that knuckle. This drag link then controls the top of that swinger. That's how those swingers work in unison. And then that tie rod controls that knuckle. One of the things you can see is this bolt is directly in line with that radius arm bolt. That's one of the benefits of using a rectangular tube frame that's square to each other versus a stock frame as well. All of this stuff is symmetrical from side to side, and I'm able to use these nice flat surfaces to measure off of to make sure that I can get all of this stuff directly in line, because this is a big arc that's rotating here. You want your steering and your radius pivots, your beam pivots, the radiuses of those to be working together. You don't want those to be fighting. If you see trucks that got pictures or videos, and when they jump, their tires are cranking in or out in the air at bump or droop, they're probably having some steering geometry issues according to beam issues. If you have two different radiuses that are intersecting at different points, that's putting a lot of load into your steering, and it's just adding a lot more input, which you're gonna feel in your wheel of your truck. So that's one of the things to reduce that, is keeping those bolts in line. So hopefully you can kind of see that from here. But like I said, on that truck, that's why that stuff's not centered. All of the stuff on that truck from side to side is not symmetrical. All of the mounts pretty much are kind of more template made, because it's more about getting stuff in line. So to get stuff in line right, realize very, very soon, maybe not soon enough into the build, that to make stuff correct, I was gonna have to not be able to, make 4 tabs and use them on both sides. One side of the frame got a set of tabs, and then you had to go make a different set of tabs for the other side. This truck, I don't have that issue. Everything that I've made on this side is a mirror image going over to that side. Hopefully you guys can see all that. Hopefully it's clear as mud. We'll flip this guy back over and flip it back up. Oh, maybe. It's 20 degrees, so all this metal is like 20 degrees. It's freezing. So there you go. I guess some shots maybe.